Peace. What's good, YouTube? It's Kareem Samadi back again with another video. So this is going to be another part of the Escaping the Matrix series. How to escape the Matrix, understanding consciousness, right? So when we talk about consciousness, it's been described in many different ways, but what you do on a regular basis is what creates your world, and your awareness of that is what defines your consciousness, right? So if your world is a limited matrix in which nothing happens in your favor, it's because whatever you are doing on a regular basis reflects that, either from your physical or your emotional states, and or what you may be thinking, or how it all translates into your mindset, right? So to be self-aware of the link between your mindset, emotional states, and your actions, and to see the link between that, which is your inner world, and your outer world, and your environment, is what can ultimately be defined as consciousness, from my perspective, from my experience, right? And consciousness is not to be confused with enlightenment, right? Consciousness is a step towards personal enlightenment, right? And consciousness and enlightenment both aren't destinations either. They are just blanket terms to describe where you may be at. And even then, in a sense, they are limiting because they're still labels, right? But what we can define as consciousness is a link between the inner world and the outer world. So whatever's going on in your inner world is constantly mutating, constantly transforming. And when we begin to take control of that, that's when we can constantly mutate and transform, either for the better or for the worse. And your level of consciousness is always adapting. It's always constantly changing, whether you realize it or not. Even if you feel like you've been staying the same, right? It can either change for the better or for the worse. It really just depends on you and how you see it and your perception. So what we have to see is that whenever we master a certain level of consciousness and we continue growing and transforming, we'll begin to feel like we don't know anything. And the reason why is because, like I said in the previous video, when you come into new knowledge after already having mastered a certain level, right, that new knowledge is going to require different things from you. It's going to teach you different lessons. It's going to challenge you in different ways. So you go from being in the deep end in the pool to being in the shallow end again, relearning a new technique of how to swim in this new environment. So it's all different, and it's always going to be something new because knowledge is infinite and you are infinite too. So that also means that your consciousness would also be infinite as well. So the growth of your consciousness, the transformations of your consciousness, challenges, all of these different things, they're all infinite. And when you go into a higher level, it's going to require different things out of you. It's going to require infinite things out of you. So, and an example of this too, right, for me, I used to be religious, and when I got more into what we call spirituality now, right, it felt like I didn't know anything. Whereas when I was religious, I first started off as a Christian, and then I went to Islam, and between the two, I was, bouncing between agnostic and atheism, right? But even then, and within those, brief periods of changing, I still felt like there was so much more for me to learn. It's like when you move up a grade in school, you thought you knew everything in the 10th grade, and then when you get to 11th grade, it feels like what you knew before doesn't apply, right? Or when you get out of high school, you go to the real world, it feels like whatever you learned in high school doesn't apply, because it doesn't. There's different things that are required out of you. So, and this happened many different times. When I found people like Bobby Hemmett, Brother Panic, Khadijah, I really felt like, after I become spiritual and I discovered people like those, it really felt like I had no idea what they were talking about. Louis Farrakhan, so many different people, Gigi Young, a lot of people. It felt like, there was just so much more for me to learn, and it also felt kind of intimidating too, and looking back, at the time I was like, it's intriguing, but I also feel like a beginner, right? And you can either take that in two different ways. You can see that as, there's a lot for me to learn, there's a lot for me to transform, a lot for me to gain, or you can see it as, this is too much, I want to stick with what's familiar, whatever works for you. Because I've heard stories of people, when they wanted to question their reality, when they wanted to get into consciousness in a different way, spirituality in a different way, it really seems like everything's crashing down. Everything you've been told has been a lie. So sticking with what's familiar, taking that blue pill, right, can keep you feeling comfortable. And it may even be what you need for this lifetime, right? But for me, I wanted to keep diving deeper. I wanted to keep going. And even now, where I definitely understand a lot of what, these people are talking about, even now, I surprise myself, just by observing my dreams. Sometimes even by listening to my own videos playing back, I learn things. I learn things even from talking to random people, because obviously it's not just about you and what you learn in the books and what you learn from yourself. But when you come across other people, they teach you different things about yourself. So when it comes to escaping the matrix, what's going to determine you going to the next level is you understanding what it takes for the level of your consciousness to move past your current environment. So this is what David R. Hawkins was talking about. I think it was David R. Hawkins in his book, Letting Go. If it wasn't him, it was Joe Dispenza in Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. But when it comes to moving past your current environment, you have to think greater than that environment. You have to act greater than that environment. You have to do greater than that environment. Otherwise, you are going to stay the same. And so that also plays into your matrix, because the matrix is made out of you. It's created from you. It's created from your mind. It doesn't matter what all these people are saying, about many different, entities, whatever the hell, right? The common denominator between what's going on outside and what's going on inside is your mind. So ultimately, understanding your mind, understanding your level of consciousness, and understanding all of that and thinking greater than the environment that you're in, that's going to be what determines whether you escape the matrix or not. It's not about how many books you read. It's not about what diet that you change to. It's not about, all the spiritual jewelry, all the spiritual trinkets that you get. It's not about how many lectures you listen to, how many classes you take. It's about you understanding yourself and making the changes needed and adjusting, really, and letting go of what doesn't serve you, right? That's where you're going to be able to measure the progress, right? And I'm not saying all those other things that I mentioned aren't going to help you either, but it's whether or not they're sinking into your mind and you're actually, applying these things, right? What you doing that, which is also you acting greater than your current environment, right? You putting those things into action instead of just consuming the information, right? But you doing the action, you doing the work is what's going to change your reality. So you can be consciously aware that your life needs to change, right? And you can also consciously desire your life to change. But subconsciously, there may be thought patterns, there may be emotional patterns, that are advocating against that change. You are your own worst enemy. So this is where, in the mythologies, they'll talk about the devil and the angel on your shoulders, right? This is why in many mythologies, it doesn't matter what it is, there's always going to be something that represents some kind of advocate to you, some kind of adversary to you. And it's always there, whether it's the ego, whether it's a devil, whether it's Set versus Horus, whatever the case may be. Doesn't matter how you slice it, because all these mythologies, all these religions are talking about the same thing. It's a battle between your mind. It's a battle between the subconscious mind and the conscious mind, or even, I would say, a battle between the lower self and the higher self, battle between the ego and the spirit. It's all a battle, right? In a sense, this is what they describe as the war in heaven. The war in heaven is a war going on in your mind. The wars going on outside are representative of the war that is going on in your mind. The chaos that we experience in this world, or that we may observe in this world, is representative of the chaos in your mind. So, and it's always going to be there because of polarity, right? We have to understand, there's always going to be two sides of the spectrum. And so whichever side you lean on, good, evil, light and darkness, whichever side you lean on, or whether you neutralize yourself and you harmonize, both sides of the spectrum within you, whatever you do is up to you. But ultimately, mental discipline and controlling the subconscious mind is what comes into play with changing your reality. So actions also matter as well. If you have certain goals in mind for what you know you want to do in your life or what you want to become, you must structure your life around that to make it happen in the subconscious mind, right? I wouldn't be sitting at almost 600 subscribers if I wasn't making YouTube videos, right? You know, I could have definitely, if I had stayed the same, I could have been sitting with all my recording equipment and not making videos, watching TV all day, going to work, right? And, you know, instead of making the videos. But if I wasn't making the videos, how could I possibly maintain these numbers, right? It wouldn't make any sense, you know? And so you have to structure your life around that to make it happen in the subconscious mind. You know, it's not necessarily you working hard, you know, but it's about you reflecting what you want. You have to reflect what you want to your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind isn't going to recognize the fact that you want something. It's only going to recognize action. It's only going to recognize symbols. It's only going to recognize the repetition. So you can't become a better musician without practicing your instrument every day, or without learning about that instrument and practicing it every day, right? Or consistently. Doesn't matter if it's every day, but it has to be consistent. So that's why people will say to do something every day, but it has to be consistent, because if it's not, your subconscious mind takes it as you not really wanting it. It just takes it as something it's just like a little thing. Whereas if you were doing it consistently, it would be much bigger, you know, to your subconscious mind. So manifestation has 3 components. You know, transforming a reality has 3 components, and that's visualization, action, and being, or results, as we call it, right? You are constantly going through this cycle at every moment in any given time. You are constantly visualizing, you're constantly doing actions, and you're constantly being, right? Therefore, to have full control over being a musician, you must first have in mind what you intend to become, and you must focus heavily on that image. This is why they say, you know, when you want to manifest something, you know, see it in your mind first. And you get to follow that with actions. If you don't follow with action, essentially what you visualize is nothing more than a fantasy. It's nothing more than an image you just made in your mind. So if you don't follow it with action, then you're not really going to get a reaction. So, you know, when we talk about the law of cause and effect, everything you do must have an effect. So if you follow what you visualize with something that you do, it will have an effect. It's that simple. So essentially, magic always works. Everything that you do, it always works. It's just you determining how it works is what makes the difference for you, right? And so the reason why most of us feel stuck or feeling like we're living unfulfilled lives is simply because we are doing actions every day that do not serve us or do not serve that reality that we visualize, you know? And so that reality that you visualize is very key. So, and if you're not doing those things, right? If you're doing actions that do not serve you, you have distractions, right? So the more distractions that you emulate on a daily basis, the more you create a reality of said distractions. So your visualization and your being can also work against you as they involve your state of mind. So you may overly identify with being a bad singer in front of crowds, but you may consciously desire to be a singer. As a result, dreams of ever singing in front of people or making music never take off. And the reason why is because, let's say something happened in your childhood where you got embarrassed in front of a large group of people when you were singing as a kid. You may not remember it, but that's why. You know, on top of that, right now you work at a warehouse 80% of the week and spend the other 20% sleeping, watching Netflix or YouTube videos of singers who you fantasize about being like. Any chance of you ever being a singer is automatically destroyed here, because you most likely visualize work or yourself failing more than you do singing, or you just watch other people do what you want to do. And so you stay in a constant state of lack, in a constant state of I don't have, in a constant state of I will never be, you know, in a constant state of I can't. And that I can't means that you won't do it, or you won't give yourself the ability to do it. But when you recognize that I won't do it because I'm scared, right? If you recognize it as that, then you can also start to unravel all the knots that are blocking you from the reality that you want for yourself, that are blocking you from the reality that you're stuck in. So you have to recognize, okay, what is that I'm doing on a daily basis, or why do I feel this way? You know, you want to get to the root of the cause or the root of the problem. So, because when you get to the root of the problem, then you can, once you remove that, everything else tumbles down. And so you can have a clearer mind this way. So your actions, right? If they consist of nothing that serves you, then, and you aren't investing in equipment and singing with your time or your money, right? If you're not doing things on a daily basis, then essentially you're telling your subconscious mind that it's not important to you. And your subconscious mind doesn't recognize anything but what you tell it. And so you can consciously keep desiring something, but it's not going to recognize that. It's only going to recognize what you do. It's only going to recognize what makes an impact on your daily life, right? And so, that's the thing. So if your actions consist of more of things that don't serve you versus things that do serve you, what do you think is going to win out in the subconscious mind? You know, it's just a matter of statistics at that point. Therefore, your state of mind or being is that of a warehouse worker who loves singing and fantasizing about being something greater, but becomes his or her worst enemy when it comes to action, when it comes to being, right? So this cycle of visualization, action, and being is something that you have to take full control of on a daily basis and get to be conscious of on a daily basis. When you're conscious of that, you're conscious of everything. You're conscious of how to adapt and what to do. But also being conscious, it requires you to be honest with yourself. But a lot of us like to lie to ourselves about why we aren't where we want to be. And that also brings you, or keeps you stuck in the matrix too, because essentially you're taking responsibility away from what you can be doing, right? And not only that, but blame, complaining, or being too focused on the past, or being too focused on the future, you know, fear, a lot of different things, apathy, depression, whatever the case may be. All these things can all get in the way of you escaping your own matrix, right? There's only one creator of the matrix, and that's you, you know, because obviously if the mind is all, then that means the mind is also the matrix. So sure, there's many different books, YouTubers, spiritual systems that shift the responsibility of this matrix that you live in, or of things, of basically of an unfavorable reality, shift it into something evil. You know, they shift it to the devil, they shift it to the government, they shift it to some alien species, whatever the case may be, right? But ultimately, your own mind is what determines whether or not you are in a matrix or feel a slave to a matrix or feel a slave to things that are out of your control, right? Your own mind determines whether or not you feel that way. And if your mind is aligned with that, then you are going to feel that way. Everything that you see is going to, it's going to line up. I promise you that, right? If it's in your subconscious mind. But your mind also works in the opposite direction, right? It also works in the fact that you can be in a world, in a matrix of your liking, in a matrix of your design, right? Because like I said, and like it's described in the laws of Tahuti, the mind is all. So you master the mind, you master everything. So, and it's easier put in words than it is understood by people. But, you know, the more that you take time to really begin to understand what that actually means for yourself, that the mind is all and all is the mind, the more you understand what that actually means to you, right? And you learn about controlling the subconscious mind, you develop a mental discipline for yourself, then whatever I'm saying will actually hold weight to you. But if it's just coming across as information, but it's not seeking in, there's no practical application, it's not going to mean anything to you. It will be useless to you until you decide to activate it, right? Activation or action, right, is what's going to determine whether you escape your matrix or not. Even if the world is run by corrupt individuals, secret societies, aliens, or whatever other shit people are preaching about today, right? All of that is nothing more than symbols to describe of what's going on in your mind, right? So we have to understand that, because if we don't understand that, then we'll be at the beck and call of things outside of us, and we'll constantly think that, okay, I have to change something outside of me first. You know, rather than looking within and understanding, okay, what can I be doing within first that's gonna, mirror what's outside of me. The inner work also must be done in order to escape the matrix. When you do the inner work, you can do the outer work too, because they correspond to each other. You cannot do one without the other, and that's very key. But for you might have to experience something outside of yourself to bring you to, or for you to see something inside of yourself that you need to work on, right? Because that's sometimes that's the way that our higher selves will guide us. It'll guide you to something outside of yourself if you haven't understood the messages that's been given to you in your inner world first. So what we have to understand is that nothing affects us unless we buy into it with our mind and allow it to, right? And sometimes there are things that are distracting enough, there are things that can be traumatizing enough that may make you buy into it for some amount of time. It really just depends on where you're at, and how much mastery you have over your mind. Your level of consciousness and action determines everything from birth to death to rebirth. So if you quote unquote stagnate in your consciousness, your life will feel like it's stagnating too. If you refuse to learn and grow, then your life will mirror that too. If you complain, blame, and victimize yourself, your life will mirror that and reinforce that as well. As I said in many other videos, life is nothing more than a pure mind game. And so your level of control, your level of understanding over how your mind works, personally for you, right? Your level of understanding and your visualization, your action, and your being, what you're doing with those three things, all that is going to determine whether you escape the matrix or not, right? You have to be conscious, you have to be aware, self-aware of the inner world, because if you're not self-aware of that inner world, then you will live life in confusion. You won't really have much direction, and until you begin to make those inner changes, it'll be much more difficult for you to make those outer changes in your world. And so whatever matrix that you may be trying to escape, it's all going to point back towards you inside, because inside is a common denominator, right? And it's very much true, right? Because I've had years for myself where I look back and I saw that I was doing the same things, or I was in the same place, or I was in the same mindset. And the reason why is because, let's say at the beginning of that year or in the middle of that year, I made a decision to continue to do things the same way, right? It's that easy. It's that easy because, and this is why you have to self-reflect consistently, every single day. This is why journaling helps. This is why meditation helps, because the more aware you become of yourself, the easier it is for you to transform, the easier it is for you to grow, so that you'll never constantly stay the same, or you'll never feel like you stay the same. But sometimes when it's been years and you feel like you've been stuck, right? That might be the indicator that your subconscious mind, that your higher self is giving you to change. Just that realization that nothing has changed might be the message that you were always looking for, or the message that you may not even have thought you were looking for, but you knew something needed to change, right? Everything works in different ways for all of us because we're all different people, at least under the illusion of being different, right? Going through the separation on different levels. So us understanding ourselves, us understanding our minds, that's gonna play a key role in escaping the matrix through consciousness. So that's the video. I hope it inspired you guys, and I hope it really motivated you guys to really learn and to really, see how you can take this back into your reality and transform and escape your matrix, whatever it may be. I wish you all the care journey and peace.